going to get started again. We're now going to start our second session on a faculty and vendor spotlight. And this will be with OLI. So, regarded as one of the world's most effective open education projects, OLI's online course development and delivery platform is built upon learning science principles and designed to facilitate research, exhaustive data capture, and continuous improvement, with course materials made available under Creative Commons licenses. Since 2002, OLI has operated as a not-for-profit organization at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and has served millions of teachers and students around the globe. I will now turn it over to Hal Turner from OLI and Dr. Eric Sambolek from SUNY's Tompkins Cortland Community College.
Thanks, Chilton. Hi, everybody. My name is Hal Turner. I'm the OLI partner and community manager. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm a little nervous about doing this because I have multiple monitors and I'm really worried about sharing the right one. So hopefully this works out. So, all right. So hopefully you are seeing first slide in my slideshow. Please somebody yell if you're not. Yeah, so welcome everybody. I'm really happy to have everybody here. This is a really good crowd. Like I said, my name is Hal Turner. I'm the partner and community manager here at the Open Learning Initiative at Carnegie Mellon, and I'm joined today by Eric Sambolek. Eric, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Okay. Hopefully I'm unmuted and it's working now.
I can hear you.
Okay, that's good. So as Hal said, my name is Eric Sambolek. I've been using OLI for about 4 years now, along with my colleague at Tompkins Cortland, Amber Gillespie, who's been pretty instrumental in helping develop and bring this into the SUNY system. So I'm kind of filling in for her in a way, but I have hopefully a lot of experience, not as much as she does, with this resource. And for the vast majority of it, the experience has been really positive. So I'm happy to come here and present today. So hi.
Thank you so much, Eric. Really appreciate it. How I'd like to structure our presentation is that I'll give a little background on OLI, a short demonstration, and even a little bit of an interactive component with the folks who are joining us. But then I'd like to really just hand it off to Eric to talk about his experience and how he has used OLI and incorporated into his teaching practice. You know, how it fits in with his class, what his students say about it, things of that nature. You know, hearing it straight from the instructor's mouth is going to be most valuable to you. So I will give my little bit and then get out of the way, and we'll hand it over to Eric. What is OLI? For the majority of you, what we really are is just complete courses. In some cases, we're also supplemental materials. Not all of OLI materials are full courses, but for the most part, we represent textbook replacements, things like statistics or general chemistry. And here are the main topic areas where you can find our materials. There are more than 40 courses. Several are under development, including a handful in the SUNY system, things like Italian and physics. We are, OLI is at its core, about 14 or 15 people at Carnegie Mellon University. We work with people around the globe, however. So OLI is not just us. OLI is the entire Carnegie Mellon University faculty and student body who have used OLI. It's learning scientists around the globe. It's all of our partners, including folks like Eric, who have used OLI with their students. It's all of our students. OLI is a huge community that has been around for nearly 2 decades, and that's really what OLI is. We like to think of ourselves as you know, in the higher ed family. We are courses by higher ed, and that means that they're made by CMU professors, they're made by professors at community colleges, they're made by subject matter experts from organizations, professional organizations, etc. So, you know, we're a huge community, but we're in the family. We are not for profit. We're courses by higher ed for higher ed. Increasingly, we're becoming an enabler of content authoring and customization. We have a tool called Echo. Not going to go into that much today because this is mostly about the courses that we offer. But I want you to know that we do offer the ability to create your own OER courses, to use our OER materials as the foundation for your own custom course, etc. I'm going to give a short demo of what OLI looks like. And I thought anybody who wants to join in and follow along in their browser could do so. It's just a few short steps. It's not mandatory by any means, but if you go to oer.suny.edu, this will give you a taste of how to find the materials that the SUNY OER services has collected for the entire SUNY system. And if you search for psychology and click on the intro to psychology OLI materials, you'll be taken to a page where you have some instructions on how the system works. So you'll choose to review your course content. You'll click the Start Here link, and at the bottom of the page that you're taken to is a link that takes you to OLI, where you're gonna join as an anonymous user. And in the chat, let me see if I can access it. I would like to. I pulled these together, so hopefully this formats properly. So there's the OER. There's the OER.suny.edu link, and here are the instructions for finding this psychology course. While you guys are doing that, I'll just give a little bit of background on OLI, and then we'll take a look at what an OLI course looks like. So from the SUNY instructor and student perspective, just a few quick points. Using OLI is really easy. You get started quickly. You can have a course built and set up in your LMS in minutes, actually. We have a system where if you choose all of the default settings for a course and the default configuration, really all you have to do is put in your title and your start and end dates, and you can stand it up in a matter of 5 minutes. Most campuses in the SUNY system have had OLI added as a tool provider already. So if you are ready to create a single sign-on link for your students, then most of the LMSs are already prepared to help you with that. And support is provided directly from SUNY OER Services, which is a fantastic group. We have been working with them for quite a while in this partnership, and can't say enough good things about how capable and fast their help has been. And another point here is that SUNY has made all of the OLI materials free for everybody. So know that there is no cost to you or to your students for any OLI materials at all. So a little bit about OLI, because it'll help inform what I'm about to show you. We were conceived in 2001 and then started in earnest in 2002. We've been around a while. We are not a flavor of the week. We began as a research project into looking at the answer of what works in online instruction. In order to do that, we had to create some content. We had to create courses that students would run through. We had to test certain techniques, apply different approaches, figure out what worked and what didn't. And over the course of more than a decade and a half, we've settled on a basic approach that works. If you're interested in seeing the independent research results, we have those on our website. I won't go into them here, but The way we like to talk about it is that you can, the Ithaca study, the Ithaca Foundation study found that students running through the statistics material in an accelerated 8-week class were able to learn twice as much in half the time. They had twice the gains of a traditional class. Both of them were instructor-led, the online version, the online accelerated version, and the face-to-face version. And there were incredible gains with the online accelerated version, both in immediate results, but also in persistence over time and in transfer. But those results are online on the OLI website. So what does work in online instruction? Where have we settled? We start with the student-centered measurable learning objective. This is essentially simple language that speaks directly to the student to give them an understanding of what material they're going to be working through. We use demonstrable language with action verbs so that you can design activities that will help measure whether students are meeting those learning objectives. We learn by doing. We embed practice early and often on the page immediately. So as soon as a student has been presented a piece of content, we practice it right away. In that practice, the design is very thoughtful. We give immediate targeted feedback to address the misconceptions, and those misconceptions are built into the question answers. So instead of answering with or instead of giving 3 throwaways and the obvious answer on a multiple choice, what you give are answers that you as a subject matter expert know are illustrative of the misconceptions that students have at that point, so that the immediate feedback can target that misconception. It speaks directly to what the students are demonstrating they're struggling with by choosing those wrong answers. And all along the way, we collect data. This data is used for 2 purposes. The primary purpose is in the administration of the course. We use the data to give you a visualization and a learning dashboard of which learning objectives the students are struggling with, so that you can address that. You can pinpoint where they're in need of your help the most. But also we use it for iterative improvement and continuous improvement efforts. It gives us the ability to see where the gaps are in the instruction, so that you can tailor your efforts between semesters or over the course of the lifespan of your material to see where you need to focus your efforts the most. This is where we should jump in. And are you guys now seeing my my SUNY OER page with the Intro to Psych course? Yeah. Okay. Great. So I'll show you a little bit about what those 4 points are that I just illustrated. So here is the syllabus for the Introduction to Psychology open and free version. This course does not have any assessments, or I should say any scored assessments in it. There are no checkpoints because this is available to anybody around the world. And it wouldn't make much sense for if we were to give away access to the academic version. Otherwise, your students could just jump in and get all the answers to their tests. So the open and free version doesn't have any assessments in it, but it has all of the rest of the content. I'd like to show you the seeing and the seeing visual system module in Unit 5, Sensing and Perceiving. The first thing you'll notice is that right up front, we have essentially a table of contents page for the module where all of the learning objectives that the students are going to encounter in the entire module are presented, along with the pages and their numbers. So we'll take a look at the visible spectrum. You'll see at the top of the page, explain how wavelength is related to the visual spectrum. This is student-centered and measurable. We can design exercises that help you get at whether students are meeting this learning objective. We present a little bit of content. It can be any kind of content. You know, it can be text and images. It can be video. It can be an interactive lab. And then immediately we put it into practice. So the student will answer the question, and if it's not right and the question has been well designed, then what you see is the immediate feedback that targets the misconception. This is how, this is part of the magic. This is where a lot of the learning actually happens. In fact, we find a lot of students will click through, even when they get it right. We give a little bit of explanation about why it's right, just in case the students are actually guessing. So it's always a good idea to provide some further support within the feedback. But we find that even when students do get it right the first time, a really common behavior is to click through all the answers because the feedback is so valuable. So we see the learning objective, the student-centered measurable learning objective, the practicing early and often, the targeted feedback. The courses are designed, for the most part, especially the full courses, they're designed to be fully encapsulated, all-inclusive environments. So we have, in the academic version, quizzes and assessments that will result in a score. That's displayed in the gradebook, so you can see how your students are performing. You can then export that out of the OLI gradebook and import it into your LMS gradebook. We don't yet have automatic gradebook flow yet, but that is coming soon. But it's a simple one-step process at the moment. And then the learning dashboard is where you'll get your learning data. So where you'll see performance against the learning objectives, and give you'll be able to see which students are struggling and be able to reach out to them directly. And you can also dig in on the you can dig in on the skills and see which assessments are contributing to that calculus, and also what the answer rates are for each of those assessments, so that you can see what questions your class is answering poorly and which ones they're succeeding with, so that you can speak directly to the questions where they're struggling the most. I will demonstrate that later if we have the time, but this is where I wanted to hand things over to Eric so that he could talk about what the actual teaching experience is like with his students. So I think right here we're going to go ahead and hand things off.
Okay, thank you, Hal. And I was maybe going to show one or two of those features and get in a little depth that Hal was talking about. But at this point, I was just going to share my screen with a very, very small PowerPoint here. Partially because I saw everybody else doing it, even though I didn't really want to. But I'm just going to show that to you. So it's essentially 2 slides, so I don't forget what I'm talking about here. So just kind of a very brief version of my own story here. Let me just blow that up, sorry. Okay, so hopefully you can see that okay. So my story, about 5 years ago, when OER was kind of just starting off, I suppose, or more people were becoming aware of it, our provost kind of started nudging a bunch of us as faculty to get more involved in this, you know, for 2 very important reasons that I'm sure you've thought about and heard about, of equity concerns. And, you know, it was obviously a legitimate concern. When I look back to a few years ago in the previous landscape, you know, sometimes I would just ask, well, how many people have bought the book? And you would see how few there were. You would talk to people after class of why not, and especially at a community college, just how much of a percentage of somebody's budget textbooks can be. And I was only using a book that cost $70 or $80 at that time, and I would still get half or a third to actually have a book. The other reason is obviously to increase success rates, and I will be talking about those in a moment, but obviously a pretty important goal. So just kind of going over the points here, I did start with something very basic just to kind of dip my feet in the water. So I had one of these basic static texts, which essentially, I've got a PDF of a book that's available to anybody, but it's not interactive. And so not surprisingly, nothing really changed in terms of success rates and things of that nature, and in terms of student feedback, but I kind of convinced myself it did no harm. And it didn't cost them any money, so I suppose, it was better than nothing. Fast forward a year, and I really wanted, if I was going to do this, I wanted to do something that was actually going to be substantial. So as I had mentioned in the intro, one of my colleagues, Amber Gillespie, has been really instrumental in bringing OLI and SUNY together. I'm lucky to have her in my institution. So we met together. It took about, I don't know, it was maybe like a half-hour meeting at a coffee shop with a couple laptops, and she's showing me how to do it. And by the end of the day, I had set up my course, and really I spent about an hour on setting it up. And it was fine. She kind of sold me on the idea that, obviously it's free, it's available, it can really do no harm. And from what I saw with the content too, I've taught intro psych a lot of times since I was in graduate school, and there's only so much variability you can have in an intro psych text. So very quickly I saw, yeah, there's no problem covering the basics. This is at least equivalent to anything that I've ever used. But then I started to see, oh, the support and what's available to you is actually better, because you got a lot of clunky stuff when you were dealing with publishers in the past. Anyway, I'm not going to get into too much detail about that. But she did warn me that it may take a little while for your success rates to go up. And she was right. So where I am, my base rate was, as it says here, in the low 60% in terms of success rates. And that's where it stayed for a year or two. And, I wasn't content with that, but I was at least, still kind of believing that, well, at least it's doing no harm. It's not costing them any money. And from what I understand and what I'm hearing and what I'm polling, people are using this more than they were using their printed text. And then I had the jump, and it was about 10 percentage points in some courses, as much as 15, where I got into the low and mid 70s, and that's where it stayed. And this is the end of the third year of that level. So I guess what I want to focus on in my last remaining slide here is what I think made things better after I got better at using the tool, essentially. So, certainly it's really important to be intentional about aligning that material. So in the past, I'm sure I got a little bit lazy saying, well, I know, the basics of what there is to know about every topic within Intro to Psych. But I said, I've really got to get into presenting it in the same order within the modules, and getting people talking the same language, because this is confusing stuff, especially the first time that you encounter it. And I really wanted to align it with my classroom delivery. I didn't want to use my classroom time entirely for content delivery. I want to make sure that students are reading first, but I also want to reward them for reading and participating. So that the things that I'm presenting, I'm getting into more depth, but I'm doing it in a similar structure in what they're seeing. And as Hal said, it really is logically laid out by some people that are smarter than me, to make sure, and as they collect their data and to continue to refine things, to kind of funnel down, to get past misconceptions and get into the most important things, and to kind of anticipate the hurdles before the students face them. I also got more and more into creating assignments based on content. I would say this is always a little bit easier if you're teaching a strictly online course, and with things that happen in the second half of the spring semester, where you were kind of forced to do this and not really rely on classroom exams and things of that nature. But I definitely got more into, for instance, in an online class where you have discussion assignments. Well, you're going to go to this page, you're going to do these practice activities, you're going to say what your misconceptions were, and you're going to have to reference things. So really, if you're not investing in this, it's not going to work whatsoever. Also, I think, I'll show you in a little while, and Hal showed you some of the content, but they do a really good job of referencing primary sources. So I started getting into more doing, I'd always done primary resource journal assignments, but now, much to my my pleasure, I saw that you know, within OLI, a lot of the references were to some really strong but easily accessible research studies. So it's kind of primed and brought up within the reading, and then, oh, by the way, we're actually going to read this whole thing. You're going to have to answer my questions about it. You're going to have to do some critical thinking. So that really helped things along. I'll show you the features in a moment. Let's see. Oh, also stressing the importance of the connection between kind of one step to the next to the next. So on day one, I always present the OLI system to them. I show them how to log in. And as Hal mentioned, you know, this is integrated within Blackboard, and we're a Blackboard campus. And it didn't used to be the case. So you did have to have a separate sign-in, and that always caused some problems for folks, especially if they didn't do it early. But now with it being single sign-on and integrated, it's so much easier. And then it kind of generates a roster for me immediately. So I tell them on the first day, you know, by next time I want to see that you're on my roster, and I get almost everybody to do that. It's attendance points. But stressing that connection between the practice activities essentially being part of the reading. So as you saw, when you click through those practice activities, you're getting quite a bit of text. And like Hal mentioned, students do have this tendency, and I do as well, to click through all the items and then see what the feedback is, because it's not just that you're hearing right or wrong. And even if you click any of the wrong answers, you get different explanations because there's a different reason for being wrong. But that's part of the content. And I stress to them that this is part of the content. And of course, I can see who's doing practice activities and who isn't. And I'll show you in a moment just that there is this connection between who is doing the practice activities and then who's doing well on the graded assignments within OLI. And then I always stress to them, once we get to exams and in-class assignments, that there is a pretty strong correlation all the way up from who's doing the practice activities, who's doing well on the graded checkpoints within OLI, and then who's doing well on the other assignments that are also very important to doing well in the course as a whole. So trying to connect all those dots for them. But let's take a quick look at one of my courses here. So I'm just going in, I guess let me back up a little bit. One of my many, many courses, and it's nice because you, once you've used OLI for a while, it does save your courses, it saves your data, it saves your grade books. So this is one that I had from last fall, but I'm not going to show you, I have a long list of them in case I ever want to look back, which often I do. So it's a nice streamlined presentation. You know, other systems, you know, you sometimes suffer from this almost wealth of features. And I'm not saying that OLI does not have a wealth of features, but the way that it's presented in a streamlined way, it's not overwhelming. And as someone like me who gets easily overwhelmed, and many of my students get easily overwhelmed, it's a very non-threatening, logical way that things are laid out. It's essentially laid out like a table of contents. Anyway, he showed you some content itself. I do want to show you a little bit more of the learning dashboard. So I was just playing around in this module 7 for methods of studying the brain, and I'm careful. I want to present it in such a way that I'm not, everything is anonymous here. But if I look at a particular learning objective that's measured by one of these practice activities, and you see this kind of color-coded system, which I'm glad I don't have much red here, and I expand it, it tells me how many students, now this is the category I really don't want, who have done nothing, who have very low level of mastery, those who are moderate, and those who are high. And then I can use this in a diagnostic way, depending on when I assign the reading. If I'm smart, which I've learned to do, I have the reading assigned first for that week or whatever unit of time that I'm using. And then I go over the detail to really diagnose, where are people struggling? Where are people putting in the effort? Where are people not reading? So this is a nice, useful layout for that, which I really enjoy. And then if I scroll to the bottom here, there are open-ended responses at the end of every one of these modules. And a module is essentially, there are usually 3 or 4 of them per what they call an OLI a unit, which is basically a chapter in a book. There's an opportunity for essentially people to write me open-ended questions to say, what do they not understand? I'm not going to click on those because they actually have student names attached to them. But then I can look in the graded stuff and the checkpoints and quizzes, just how many people have done it, what have they scored, what were the most difficult questions. And again, I can use this, and now these are graded. But one thing I've learned is these graded checkpoints, and there's one for every single module. So in the way I set it up, they're typically between 35 and 45 modules for the entire course. And I usually make that approximately 1% of the grade per checkpoint. So it's still relatively low stakes, but it's graded. And it gives me this diagnostic data to say, wow, this is really where people are struggling. Here's how I'm going to use this. And what I'm thinking about for the fall, although of course things are a bit up in the air, I have some courses that are going to be at least somewhat synchronous. So I'm going to have maybe 1 day out of the week in a 2-day-a-week course where I'm interacting remotely, but synchronously with students. So I'm probably going to have the first day be when the assignments are due and the reading is supposed to be done. And of course, I'll know if it is or it isn't. Use the second day after looking at the diagnostics to figure out, okay, what do people really understand? What do we need to spend more time on before we get into more high stakes graded material, so that we can talk about that and I can already have direction before I go into the classroom, rather than just bombard them with content, or already have a prepared video with a PowerPoint in it, or I can shift time accordingly. You'll see how many students completed. I will say my denominator is a little bit inflated because I'm in here as a demonstration student, because I did student preview a bunch of times. So I come in as an individual student several times. So my denominator is actually inflated on that. But when you kind of set that aside, it does give you some really useful information there. What else can I tell you here about this stuff? I had 1 or 2 things written down that I didn't want to forget. Presentation isn't clunky. We went into that. It's Blackboard integrated. We went into that. The support. So it's when it first started, you might run into a glitch here or there. There was a lot of stuff that was Flash Player enabled stuff. And depending on, what type of access my students had, particular activities wouldn't run. And it usually wasn't anything that was, if you don't have access to this video or practice activity, there's no way you're going to pass. But I would get, pretty quick turnaround. Now it's almost remarkable how quick the turnaround is. So that's really been wonderful. I will also say, and Helen and I had this discussion yesterday, I'm sure all of us are worried about the larger landscape of what's going on in higher education and how it's going to be affected by the pandemic. But one thing I'd mentioned to Hal is I said, it's great that you guys are tied into an institution like a Carnegie Mellon, because whatever happens in higher ed, I'm not willing to make many predictions. I do worry about, institutions like my own that are small and work at community college, but the bigger institutions that have larger endowments, my bet is they're not going anywhere. So to have ties to somewhere like a Carnegie Mellon, like Hal said, they're not a flavor of the week. They're going to be around a long time. So that's definitely a nice thing to be a part of. The other thing I was going to say about assignments as well, with all these practice activities, when you get students like mine, and I don't know how many people out there are teaching at 2-year schools. I know we have a big mix, but one of the number one things I always hear is, I'm not a good test taker, and I have so many students that had IEPs and were not great students in high school. This takes some of the anxiety of testing away. There's so much low stakes material that it's great. And some of these activities, you have a couple different categories of them. And one of the categories, a lot of times you get questions before you've really read enough material to really get it right. So it really is useful to kind of click through those options and see, am I going to, so it's not like, oh my God, red, I got it wrong, green, yay, I got it right. That means I'm a better person. It takes some of that fear of failure away, so you get higher levels of participation. Because what I used to see, and I do still see sometimes when students do not do practice activities, you see some of this stopping out behavior where, well, I wasn't doing well, so I just quit before I could fail. But the more that students persist in these practice activities and the more regular of an activity that it becomes for them, there is less of this fear of failure and of trying, because I'm just learning, I'm just improving, I'm just reading. It's not that I'm attached, that a number is being attached to it, that I'm going to connect to my worth or my value or my intelligence or something like that. And the instant feedback is absolutely valuable. So I use it a lot. I've been showing you the aggregate level, but on the individual level, it's really valuable when I talk to students during office hours, because in the past, when a student says, oh, I study really hard, all I could do is, well, how do you study? And then inevitably we'd figure out you could be doing this in better ways. But I could only ask them, are you doing the reading? And if so, how much? And I know as a psych professor, relying on people's memories with vague descriptions of yes, no, I feel like, I remember, are incredibly unreliable measures of what actually happened. So I've got the data, and as my colleague has said to me before, Amber, she said, this thing is like Santa Claus. It knows if you've been naughty, it knows if you've been nice, it knows what you've been doing. So I can see, and not for the sake of chastising them, but I can see, oh, well, you didn't do the practice activities in this unit. Let's look at how you did on the exam, and oh, you did miss a lot of these. That's what you got to do for next time. And because I test them frequently enough and there are enough chances, and usually the way I do it, I count, say about 75 or 80% of the graded checkpoints towards their grade. If they pass more of them, they become extra credit, or they knock out ones that have been failed. It gives them this chance at remediation. It gives me this very quick diagnosis of where aren't people doing well. And I can directly email them through the system. Although I could also, I can do the same thing within Blackboard. We have Starfish, I can do it within Starfish. So the early intervention piece, which is very important for lots of students, especially for my population, is vital. And I think that's really something that has helped with the success rates. So that's, I think, the main things that I have to say about my experience. I don't know if we want to, where we are in terms of time, and I haven't been looking at the chat, in terms of things that people may want to know here, or if Hal, if you want to jump in and help me here.
You must have covered everything that anybody could ever want to know, because there have been no questions. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that could
Thank you so much, Eric.
You're welcome.
I just posted in the chat, if anybody is interested in seeing all of the OLI offerings that are in the SUNY OER catalog, there is the link. It will filter down all of the OLI materials that way. So we're open to questions. What questions does anybody want answered? All right.
Crickets.
Stephanie asked if we could review info on developing a new course. Yeah, sure. It's we have a tool called Echo, where you can either build entirely from the ground up with your own material. You can bring in OER from other sources, such as Pressbooks or OpenStax. We have an ingestion tool where if you have things in Google Docs, we can turn those into OLI pages. And we can work with you on any number of levels. We've OLI has engaged in development projects at different levels for nearly 2 decades now. So we've worked with entire consortia who have brought SMEs from around the country to bear on different portions of content, all the way down to an individual instructor who is looking to build a single module on prose style, for instance. There are always questions about what your budget is, what your timeline is, what your source material is, and we can go over with you, all of the questions and all of those answers, and develop a plan based on what your needs are and what you're able to bring to the table in terms of content and time. Let's see, got a couple more questions. Is all the courseware available on the OLI site? Yes. So the coursework is available on the OLI site in the sense that I'm going to answer the question I think you're asking, which is, do you have to use Blackboard? And the answer is no, you don't have to use Blackboard. And the other possible answer there is the work actually being done in OLI as opposed to Blackboard? And the answer there is yes, it's being done in OLI. So OLI is essentially iframed in. So when you click the link, the single sign-on link in Blackboard, what happens is you get a pop-up that is the OLI material, and then you're working within OLI, but you don't have to sign in because the single sign-on enables that. All of the OLI work then is contained in the OLI environment, and if you need to export the grades to bring them into Blackboard, then that's a step that you can take. Like I said earlier, we're working on a tool that upgrades the LTI experience, that connection between Blackboard and OLI, so that the grades can flow in. So that's pending. The shorter modules that we're developing. So yeah, I'm trying to think of some of the, so right now OLI is developing a course called, it's essentially how you learn, and it's a student-facing course that helps them understand how to learn online in an effective way. That's going to be a short course that is essentially like a what we call sidecar course. At CMU, we've found that students graduate with, like in most institutions, shortcomings in certain soft skills. And so one of the efforts that we've undertaken is called the sidecar project, where you can insert small pieces of instruction that would be helpful in your context, but for which you don't have to be an expert yourself. So we have one on conflict resolution and working in teams called Collaboration U. And that's for courses where the students have a high teamwork component, and it teaches them how not to, how to get along during the all of their interactive processes with their peers. We're developing other ones on, for instance, proposal writing and things of that nature. So those are the small courses that are under development. We have lots that are already that already exist, like visual design. There's one on the visual design of documents. You can find them in the catalog, but if there's one that you're interested in developing, we would be happy to talk to you about it. The languages that are offered. So we offer Spanish 1 and 2, French 1 and 2, and French 3 is about to come online. Mandarin 1 and 2, and we have Arabic for global exchange. And the folks at Binghamton at SUNY Binghamton have undertaken an Italian course that colleagues from around the SUNY system are actually going to contribute to. So that's in development now. Let's see. So, Mina Joseph. I would have to think about that, about what we have that would be a good representation of functionality that would work well in that sort of course. So OLI does not have a native tool for sharing files. Instead, we encourage people to use existing technologies and embed them in the course. So for instance, Dropbox has an invitation tool. So if you want to receive submissions of papers or files, you can set that up as a destination, and then there's an invitation URL that would that is part of that that setup that you would then embed in your course, and students would click it and submit their materials in that way. One of the things that OLI focuses on, or rather doesn't focus on, is rebuilding the wheel. Anything that already exists and other people are doing much better, we tend not to build our own tool for, but rather look for workarounds of that nature, where you can embed it and then use it effectively if somebody else has already built that sort of thing. But this, we like to think about creative ways to provide instruction and facilitate interactions. And your course sounds like a really good opportunity for us to investigate some opportunities. So I'd love to talk to you more about that later. Evidence of the community and inquiry framework. Community of inquiry framework. I'm not, Camille, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand the question. Would you mind clarifying in the chat or going, asking with your mic verbally? Global history or ancient history? I'm sorry, Leslie, we do not yet, but we are looking for folks to develop those. Spanish with Lumen. Yes, Lumen has Spanish, and I think Josh can speak to that. If you're here, Josh, have you guys released Spanish 2 yet as well?
Yeah, thanks, Al. Spanish 1 and 2 are out and in the catalog there for people to look at.
Okay, great. I know that was a new one, and I didn't recall whether the Spanish 2 was.
Yeah,
was
Spanish
ready.
2 came out, I think, in March, if I recall correctly. So it is new.
Okay. Yeah, all global history or ancient history. I'm sorry, we don't. We're like I mentioned, we're really soliciting all offers to add to the catalog. There was a question earlier for CogBooks about whether the material that you have to create for OLI is then automatically open. The answer to that is no, though we do ask that, we do encourage that. That's our mission. Everything that we build at OLI ourselves has been released in an open and free OER format. So if you wanted to use it as the foundation for your own release, then you would have the opportunity to do that. We do work with people who have developed proprietary content and they control the copyright on it, and that's not a problem for us. But wherever possible, we would like to contribute to the OER movement and make things available whenever possible. So the cost to develop a course is a really difficult question to answer. It depends, and I hate to pass the buck in that way. It has to do with whether you're employing existing OER, how big the team you're surrounding yourself with is, whether you're building a small module to address one particular problem that you want to dig in with your students on, or whether you want to build a full course. Historically, full courses have been in the tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on whether what grant funding there has been, to entirely free. So where material comes in from OER sources and the subject matter expert and the learning engineers contribute their time gratis, and you know, what comes out the other end has been developed essentially for $0. So, you know, difficult to nail down, but it's one of those things where we would love to talk with you about what the variables are. You know, how much time you have, whether you have funding, what the ultimate goal is. You know, those things all bear on the cost. Okay, so that's it in the chat so far. I'm happy to take more questions. And any questions for Eric about his incorporation of OLI in his teaching practices? I hope this has been helpful. It was really fun to prepare for, and you know, I really enjoyed being here.
I also did want to mention one thing quickly, Hal, and I've forgotten my notes. Very important piece is student feedback, and you know, a lot of what I have is anecdotal. Although when I look at the numbers, you know, in terms of assessment, things haven't changed too much. But the feedback that I do get for the open-ended responses is very largely positive. And I think you and I had talked about yesterday, at a small school like mine, I get a lot of what we call trailers, students that start out in a 100 level course and take your 200 level course. And a question I often get on the first day is, oh, is there the same online book and checkpoints as in this course as there was an intro? And I said, sorry. And for the most part, 90% of the time plus is disappointment. That, oh, I wish, you know, I really like that format. I wish that was available for more of my courses. So I take that as a real positive endorsement of the system. So I just did want to mention that.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Okay, so I just want to say thank you again to Hal and to Eric. It was great to be able to see the platform and hear your perspective, Eric, from the faculty side. So thank you very much for the great perspective and great presentations.
Thank you too. Thanks, Eric.
I would like to remind everybody to participate in the poll if you've not done so already. The link was just added into the chat again. And remember, if you participate in the link, then you can be added to the door as a possibility of winning the door prize. And just as a reminder, our final session of the Adaptive Learning Virtual Symposium is next week on Wednesday, July 15th at 2 p.m. At this time, we'll be taking a deeper look at McGraw-Hill. We'll also be spending some time reviewing practical next best steps to take if you're interested in using adaptive learning courseware. Registration remains open for the symposium, so please feel free to invite your colleagues to join us for our last session. So again, thank you to everybody, to all of our presenters, to everyone that participated today. Again, take some time to click on the link and participate in the poll if you haven't already. And otherwise, have a great rest of the week, and we will see you next week for our last session.